guys, welcome back to this very windy, cold, late October day here in Maine. I'm going to answer some questions I've got past couple weeks about some of the videos I posted about fishing the river here. I've got a lot of questions from people asking if I could just talk a little bit about what I look for in the river when I fish for trout and salmon. So that's primarily what this video is going to be about today. But it's pretty windy today, so I'm not sure how much of this camera I'm going to be using because it keeps falling over because of the wind. It's about 35 degrees with probably 15-mile-an-hour wind, so it is pretty chilly. But we're going to get right into it and see if we can find some fish. Okay, so what we're going to start with is this spot right here. If you can see, this rock I'm standing on goes out about another 10, 15, 20 feet. Beyond that's the main river that travels down. One of the first things I look for is a little rock outcrop like this right here. So what it does is it creates a little bit of an eddy downstream from where the rock comes out. And I don't know how well you can see it, but the main river goes, and right here in front of me is a little bit of a slack pool, a little bit of an eddy pool. And this is one of the first places I look for when I fish any river, is a slack pool behind a rock that comes out from shore, or ledge that comes out from shore. And there's a fish right there, first cast. So what my plan is I'm going to fish each spot, for 5-10 minutes and then move on to the next one. If I don't catch a fish in an area that I talk about, I'm going to try to splice in some footage from a prior video. And that right there is a beautiful brown. Here we go, first fish of the evening, nice little brown, probably 14. First cast in this spot. Gonna get that fish back. And that fish was hanging in this slack pool, this little slack pool eddy that's created by this rock that comes out from shore here. And what these fish do is they hang in the slack current. Oh, just missed one. And what I was just getting ready to say is sometimes the fish are hanging from this current line into the slack water. Sometimes they hang from the current line into the main current. These fish will hang right around this current line because that's where a lot of bugs will come down the river. That's where a lot of bait fish will come down the river. And them fish can hang right on the edge of that current line. There's a fish. Them fish can hang right on the edge of that current line like this one did. And pretty much just eat up whatever comes down that current line. And what do we have? Another nice brown. Yep, another nice brown. This one was right on the current line. Another beauty. Another beauty. That's probably another 14, 15-inch brown. Nice and fat. This one's definitely been eaten well. Okay, I'm going to maybe try to get one more fish in this area. And them fish came in approximately, this is just a rough guess, 6 to 8 feet of water. Maybe up to 10. I really don't know how deep it is right there. All right, so we're gonna head downriver now. I caught them 2 fish. I've been here about, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes maybe. But we're gonna head downstream and I'll show you guys some other things I look for when I fish these rivers. So one of the other big things I look for is a downstream V. I don't know how well you can see this because it's kind of windy and there's a little ripple on the river, but there's a little bit of a downstream V. There's this rock here and that rock out there probably 20, 30 feet. This river is coming down and coming through this area, and it's creating a downstream V into these ripples down there. And what happens a lot of times is the fish will hang right in this downstream V, because this is where a lot of the bait fish and bugs again will kind of come down and funnel into this one area. So I normally pick up a lot of fish in these downstream V's, and oftentimes they're created by rocks, and them rocks will also have an eddy pool behind them. I'll talk a little more about them. Yeah, there's a fish right there. Perfect. Oh, that one came off. All right, so kind of lost track what I was saying. Anyway, I'll just talk about where that fish came. That fish came on the far side of this downstream V, right on that current line created by that rock right there. And I don't know if I pulled him out of the eddy pool or if he was hanging in the downstream V, but that right there is a perfect example of where fish will hang out is, for one, in a downstream V, and again on any type of current line, current break that's created by a rock, a ledge that comes out. It's just a good overall spot to hit. All right, so just that one fish that let go, so we're gonna head downstream and I'll show you guys another spot I fish. All right, so I just want to talk real quick about this spot. There's really not much to talk about, but it's just a pretty flat, calm section of this river. You know, there's no real big rocks to hit, no big eddy lines to hit. Oh, nice fish right there. But these fish will hang in sections of river where there's no eddy lines. That one's actually digging. That one's actually fighting pretty good. Just because we don't see a rock doesn't mean there's not a rock down there. And I always make sure I hit these flat sections. And that actually is a small brown, but he smoked this spinner. I thought this fish was twice as big as it actually is. I normally don't spend a lot of time in these areas, but you can normally pick up a fish or two. You know, if you do kind of a complete fan cast, you know, with a couple different lures, spend 5 or 10 minutes in each one of these areas, you know, you can pick up, you know, some trout and salmon, because you never know, you know, where there's a rock. You know, it may not look like there's a rock, but, you know, there could be something hanging down there under a rock that's only, you know, a foot tall, you know, and 2, 3, 4 feet of water, and you know that rock on bottom is enough to give that fish a little bit of a break, and he'll just kind of hang down there behind that rock and again hit all the bait that's coming down the river. Oh, another one right there. Nice, very nice. And this one seems decent. What do we have? Another brown. Yeah, another sturdy brown. Oh, perfect. Popped right out of my hand. So if we look upriver just a ways, you can see this rock sticking out of the river. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit of an upstream V. That is them eddies I was talking about earlier. This one's a little close to shore, but it's enough where there may be a trout, you know, hanging in that eddy pocket. And I always try to cast straight off of shore, 90 degrees, and fish my lure downstream. I'm not a big fan of casting this fish. I'm not a big fan of casting upstream and bringing my lure downstream. I don't know why. I just never really seem to catch that many fish that way. I don't know if it doesn't look natural enough for the fish, but I much prefer casting straight off from shore, you know, fishing the lure as it's going down and then bringing it back up. With a solid brown. So this fish is so healthy, I had to get a shot of it on the front-facing camera there. Probably another 14, 15, but nice big fat belly, nice and healthy. He's certainly been eating well. Beautiful colors. I absolutely love them red dots that are on these fish. But we're gonna get this one back and probably head down river a ways. All right, so that's a really good spot there. But I want to show you guys a few other spots. So we're gonna go a little further south. That was 3 nice fish in that area. I probably could have caught another fish or two, but we're gonna head down this way a ways, and there's another rock ledge that I want to try to fish. I've never come this far down and I want to give it a try. So, okay, so we are a little further south. I don't know if you can see, but there's not as much commotion on the surface. It looks much flatter. Even though you can see it moving, you don't see as much of the ripples. So what that tells me is that this spot is probably a little deeper than that last spot I fished. And that's something else you want to always kind of keep track of, is roughly, you know, what you think. Oh, fish right there, first cast. What you want to pay attention to is the depth too. I mean, I have no idea how deep that actually is, but if I had to guess, I'd guess it was 6 to 8 feet, just because there's not as much surface activity. Another beautiful brown, a little racier than the other ones, but it's all right, we'll take him. And again, what I'm trying to do is cast straight off the shore out at a 90 degrees. And I'm just kind of creeping this lure in. And another tip too is I always change the speed of my retrieve, just like any type of fishing, whether it's bass fishing, trolling, fishing for muskie, pike, anything. Sometimes I creep this in super slow. Other times I'm burning it in pretty fast. Oh yeah, that was a hit. I just try to experiment and see, because sometimes the fish, there's a fish. Oh, that one feels decent. I think it's just in that fast current. Sometimes you never know. I mean, you could be casting over fish that are interested in it, but they're just not willing to, make a really committed travel to a fast moving bait. So sometimes if you slow your presentation down, you can get some of them fish that may be looking at it, but just aren't wanting to travel for it. That's a beauty right there. Another absolute beautiful brown trout. This is the biggest of the night. This one's 16, maybe pushing 17. Check out that brown trout, beautiful. Nice and healthy, well proportioned, nice belly on it. Nice red dots. I hope that shows on the camera. Just beautiful colors on these fish. I love these fall browns when they darken up and really get them red spots going. All right. And that fish came, if you see this rock here, there's another rock right under the surface just in front of my rod here. And there's just a little bit of a current line going to that rock from this rock. And that fish was right on that current line. Like I had said earlier, one of my most productive places, I just had another fish on that current line. One of my most productive places I get fish out of are off of current lines, current breaks. Whether that's from a rock in the middle of a river or a rock ledge coming out from shore. I'd say probably 60% of my fish I get on a current line. Oh, that hit immediately. Oh, I dropped it. And that's about as far upriver as I like to cast. That was maybe, say I'm going 90 off a shore, there was maybe another 20 degrees north. That's about as far as I like to go. I just feel like I can't, oh, there's a fish, there we go. I just feel like I can't control my lure quite as good casting upriver and bringing it down. Another nice brown. Another beauty, well-rounded, well-proportioned, really fat belly on it. And I've mentioned this in some of my other videos. I try to mention it in every one, but sometimes I forget. And whenever I use treble hooks, I always pinch the barbs down just because I feel like it does far less damage to the fish than if you just run a stock treble. So this is the last fish for this area. We're gonna head south and I'm gonna hopefully hit a place that I've never fished before, or hit a section of this river that I've never fished before. Okay, nice brown. He's barely hooked. Barely hooked. Barely hooked. All right, we're gonna head south. And just another tip as I'm walking to my next spot is don't be afraid to leave a pocket of fish and try another section of river. I do that all the time. I'll leave a section where I'm catching fish like that. And sometimes all it takes is just, walking, 15, 20, 30 yards downriver. And you can find more fish. You can learn more about the area. Okay, so we're gonna try this spot real quick. And this spot is a spot sometimes I catch a ton of fish in, other times I don't catch a fish at all. And I'll explain what I'm looking at with this area. So as you can see, fairly flat, even though it's current that's moving and you can see it moving. Oh, is that a fish? Oh, I was hung up. Even though it's obviously moving current, it is much flatter than that current and much flatter than that current about a cast length away. I don't know how well you can see that on the camera, but it goes from relatively flat in regards to choppiness and then changes to real rough current. That current over there with the choppiness is substantially shallower than between myself and that area. So this main current of the river is sweeping down, and it's getting funneled between that shallow bar there and the shore, and it's creating a big downstream V. I don't know how well you can see that. You have a pretty good eddy line just about a cast length away, and that V's down into this real rough water, and it's real shallow, real rocky. You can actually see some rocks sticking out. I don't know if that'll show on camera or not, but sometimes this is a great place to catch fish, and sometimes it's not, because there's a lot of water pressure coming down here, and sometimes the trout won't come up off the bottom to hit your lure because there's so much current. Sometimes they will, depends on how much current's coming down. But this is always an area I look for and try, even though I know it may not be as successful as an area. There's always a chance that you'll catch a fish or two here. Oh, there's actually a nice fish behind that. And there's a rock right in front of me creating a little bit of an eddy. If you see right here, this little boil is a rock I can just see under the water. You guys can't see it, but there's a rock right here creating a little bit of an eddy. And again, that fish hit right on that eddy line. And even though it's as close to shore as it is, there's still a nice fish hanging there. And he just didn't get it. He didn't even really hit my lure. He just kind of rolled on it. But again, going back to the current lines, the eddy lines, you know, them are a must-have when you're fishing a river. Going back to what I was saying earlier about casting straight off the shore and fishing the lure as it comes down, once in a while I'll break that rule, and this is an example. I'm standing downstream of this rock right here, which is creating an eddy probably, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 feet down. So I will break that rule once in a while and cast right up into that eddy pocket and reel down, because sometimes there'll be fish hiding in that eddy pool, and what I found is you can get fish casting upstream in an eddy pool like that, and I really can't. Oh, that may not be good. I just kind of tripped, and during the process oh, perfect. I got my lure hung up above me, but it came out. So I'm gonna just do a cast or two to these current lines, just see if there's a fish that's hanging out. Yep, there we go, right in that eddy line. Oh, small one. So I don't know if you can see it, but this rock on our left side of the rock comes down, a little bit of an eddy line, a little bit of a current line. And that fish was hanging right on that current line. And I just wanted to say that, you know, these are just how I fish it. I'm not saying this is the only way you can fish a river. This is just what I think of when I'm fishing a river. I'm not saying you can't catch them other ways. I'm not saying you can't. Yeah, there's a fish in there. They're hanging right in that eddy. Got him. Right in that eddy pool. I'm not saying, you know, my way is the only way. This is just how I look at a river. Again, this is a good example of how these fish will hang in an eddy line. Because I mean, that was probably 30 feet away from that rock. And, oh, one right there. A nice one right next to shore. And I'll try to explain this one, because it doesn't look like much, but again, we're talking about a current line here. So another tip, as you've seen, is you don't have to cast a million miles to get these fish. I mean, I just caught 2 fish right close to shore and missed a couple right close to shore. So you don't have to, you know, cast all the way across the river to hit these fish. And I just want to emphasize one more time that these few fish I just missed came off of this current line from that rock up there, probably 40, 50 feet away. That's a big enough rock that it's creating a little bit of a current line down to right about here. And it's just enough that these fish are kind of hanging on either side of that current line. Oh, one surfaced right in front of me here. There we go, fish. That one was right in that eddy. All right, that's a beautiful one right there. There we go, another beauty. There we go, just as that was coming out of the eddy. Oh, nice one. This one actually jumped. All right. All right, nice solid one. Another beauty. All right, guys, so real quick, I just wanted to talk about this rock. This is a rock I was just fishing south of. I was casting upstream, hitting this eddy, and I was picking up a few fish. I just wanted to give you a close-up look of this rock. It's fairly good size, and it's creating a pretty good eddy coming down maybe 15 feet. But the current line from this goes probably twice that, and that's where I was picking up a lot of fish. I don't know if you can see it that well, but if you look at the main current of the river, it comes down, sweeps next to this rock, and you can see that current line go down to right about where my rod's pointing. And that's where I was getting a bunch of fish, was right in that area. All right, guys, so just real quick as I'm walking, I'm gonna talk a little bit about this faster water. This water right here is substantially choppier because it shallows up a bit. It's pretty rocky through here. And it's just an area that I've never been incredibly successful fishing. I know people personally that love fishing water like that. I'm just not one of them. I've never been terribly successful fishing water like that. But I do suggest you try it. If you have a river that looks like that and you know it's shallow and rocky, it's certainly worth trying. But it's just a place I've never been really successful at. Okay, so this is the next spot we're going to be fishing. I'm not going to be fishing this side because this is where the main current comes down. I'm going to fish the back side, which is going to turn into an eddy because these come out and go probably, I don't know, 100 feet or so from shore, which is going to create a nice eddy pool. So I've never fished this area. I've never fished this section of the river. So this will be my first cast in this area. Okay, guys, so this is the first time I've laid eyes on this specific part of the river. As you can see, this comes from shore, comes out to where I'm standing. I mean, actually just above. And I'll just go over what I'm initially seeing. So main river comes down, starts to come through these rocks, creates a nice downstream V that I'm gonna fish. There's a nice eddy behind this third rock you can see right here, which creates an eddy line going towards the main current. This choppier section here, I may cast to a few times, but my main points of this, and I think where I'm going to catch most of my fish, are on this current line here, where it turns into this slack pool. I'll probably get a few fish behind this rock in that eddy that's behind the rock, and I'll probably get a few fish as the river makes contact down by that other rock. So that's my prediction. And I'm going to start right on the edge, the right-hand edge of this current line, and see if we can get bit. I would have bet money I got fish on that first cast. All right, we're going to try right in the middle of the current line now. Yeah, had a hit. And this wind is brutal tonight. My hands are froze. They're cherry red. I don't know how well you can see it, but I forgot gloves tonight, and my hands are actually starting to hurt. It's so cold. There we go, fish. Perfect. Oh, it came off. All right, so I'll talk real quick about that, that fish there. That fish was hanging just to the left of this current line. This current comes down, sweeps through these two rocks, creates a little bit of a channel, which is next to the eddy that this rock is making. And that fish was hanging right on the current line and where the eddy slack water is. And it felt like a decent fish. Felt like it hit it pretty hard, but it just didn't get it good enough. So I'm kind of right on the back side of the eddy. There we go. Oh man, I lost another one. That was on the back side of the eddy there. And another tip I always like to do is I always like to try to start downstream and work upstream if I can. Like in this situation, I'm starting downstream at the back side of that eddy, because if I get a fish, that fish is going to go downstream and I'm going to pull them upstream towards me, and I won't disturb any fish that's hanging out closer. So what I'm going to do is just kind of segmentally work my way up to that rock there. and hopefully I won't disturb any fish along the way, you know, further upstream. I'm really surprised that there's not more fish hanging here. I mean, there's fish here, but I'm just not wanting to really commit. All right, so that's about another 10 foot further upriver. All right, guys, so that was a full sweep. I started from the right-hand side of this current slip here, worked my way all the way up, and I just missed these few fish down in this area. And I gotta say, I'm a little surprised. I figured it would be a little more productive here, because I mean, this spot actually looks awesome. All right, so I'm gonna do 2 more casts, and I'm gonna throw the Rapala, or maybe a spoon. There we go, got one. Stay on, stay pinned. Got to get one out of this area. Come on, stay pinned. And this fish was basically at the back side of the eddy created by these rocks here. It's pretty much down, I don't know, that's got to be 50, 60 feet. Here we go, nice little brown, nice fat one. Look at the belly on that thing. Barely hooked, that slid right out. It's one of the perks I use in trebles that have the barbs pinched down about, I don't know, to maybe like a quarter of what they come from the factory. All right, guys, I'm thinking we're gonna wrap it up there. It's getting cold, and for some reason the fish just aren't hanging out in this area. All right, guys, we're calling it there. It is incredibly windy. My hands are froze, and we're wrapping it up there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I hope even more you guys got some tips out of it. I tried my best to throw in as many tips as I could think of. Sometimes I get writer's block when I start talking about tips and stuff, so if I think of anything else, I'll either just do like a voiceover or you know, write it in somewhere. Woo! That right there, folks, was a brutal fall. Broke my elbow. Came down onto this slippery rock here. It was covered by leaves, and down I went. And that insult to injury, I get my lure caught up in the tree up there. Come on. You gotta be kidding me. Alright, guys, we're calling it good there. I took a pretty good fall on the way out. I was doing my outro and down I went. I stepped on some wet leaves that was on some rocks, and down I went. I went right on my elbow. Thankfully I didn't hurt it. Thankfully I didn't snap a rod. You know, thankfully I didn't break my camera. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. I hope even more that you guys got some info out of it. I tried my best to include everything I can think of when I fish a river like this. Sometimes I get writer's block when I do a lot of talking and I forget what I want to talk about. So if you guys have any further questions, just let me know and I'll try my best to answer them. But we're going to sign off for this one, and we'll see you soon.